Hi people, it's Archivist here, and today we're going to be reviewing Season 1 of Hitman. So this game came out episodically in that you could play each of the levels individually and buy them over time rather than waiting for the full product, but I decided to wait and experience the entirety of Season 1 together. And I am incredibly impressed by Hitman. This, if nothing else, is the most unique take on stealth I've seen in a long time. This is something that stands out from the Assassin's Creeds and the Far Cries of the modern era to give you a version of stealth that's a little more nuanced and I think more deliberate. So what I've noticed in a lot of modern stealth games is that stealth is usually just another viable option. Take Far Cry for example, which really drives this point home. In Far Cry, you have these different outposts and you can approach them stealthily by being very quiet and taking out enemies one by one silently, or you can go in guns blazing, and although going in guns blazing will raise the alarm, it's a totally viable option, right? The game doesn't want to punish you for doing that, it just wants to give you an incentive for doing stealth as well. In Hitman, however, although you do have the option to pick up an automatic rifle and do as much damage as you possibly can with it, it's not how the game is meant to be played. In fact, the shooting mechanics are made to be deliberately difficult. If you try and fire an assault rifle, you'll be immediately put off, I think, by the high recoil, for example. It's not something like in Call of Duty where you can easily mow down a bunch. You have to be very careful and use it. I think it's fair to say as a last resort. But the way that this game works is it throws you into a sandbox. And before we get into the gameplay element, let's just talk about the graphics here. Each of these environments is distinct, well detailed and beautiful. My personal favourite is the coastal town of Sapienza, which has this fantastic look to it where it's almost like being in a James Bond film where you have an estate in front of you that's very opulent, you've got a town with all these holiday makers, and then you have this underground base that you have to infiltrate. But that is very different from, say, another mission which sends you to USA, Colorado, where it's a farm that's been occupied by the military. They're two very different feeling levels. Another level would be something like the hotel in Bangkok, which has a fantastic interior design that looks almost like a giant greenhouse. But when you are thrown into these levels, you're given 1, 2, or I think in one case 4 targets to take down. And you are given so much freedom in how you do this, but at the same time, it's not made easy for you. If you so choose, you could immediately identify the target and shoot them in the head with a silenced pistol. That is an option. However, because there are multiple targets, and this is I think why there are multiple targets in the game, you have to consider what comes next. So again, there's a level where you pretty much see one of your targets walk up to you within the first minute of it, right? You can just see him walk straight out of the hotel. You have the option to take him out there and then, but that's going to make taking out the secondary target very hard, because not only are you going to, not only are you going to get all the guards coming at you because you've shot him in the open, but also you'll find that the other target goes into lockdown mode where he's surrounded by loads of his guards, so he's really hard to take out. He will be more suspicious, he'll be harder to infiltrate, so therefore just going in guns blazing and taking out one of the targets quickly isn't really an option, but you can do it. I mean, there's nothing to stop you trying at least to pick up an assault rifle and shooting your way through, but it's not the most satisfying way of doing it. So again, let's use that hotel as an example, and I'll try and show you some gameplay here of that. So you're tasked with taking out this high-profile singer who is accused of killing his girlfriend by his girlfriend's parents, so they hire you to take him out. He's in the Emperor's suite, he's surrounded by loads of guards, and if you try and just go in your normal clothes, you will be detected very quickly. So what the game suggests you can do is after you eavesdrop on a conversation, you learn that they have got a replacement drummer in. However, he's not seen the replacement drummer in person. So you locate the replacement drummer, make sure he's out on his balcony so no one sees, you choke him out, disguise yourself as him, then as the drummer you go over to the singer, you play the drums for him and you impress him, and then you lure him out onto the roof because he wants to talk to you in person because he's so impressed with you, do a bit of discussion with you. But as he does this, because he's asked to talk in private, all his bodyguards move to one side so no one's looking at him. And the moment that no one's looking, you get out the fibre wire and you garrote him and he's out. You kill him. And if you manage to put him in a discreet location, no one will ever know he's gone until you've already left, giving you then an opportunity to focus on the secondary targets in the level without knowing that everyone's after you. What this can lead to is a very slow-paced version of stealth where you have to do waiting to make sure that the opportunity is just right. So, for example, where I just mentioned there was the drummer who you have to try and take out. It's quite tricky to do so because he walks into a bar, and when he's in the bar, he's got loads of eyes on him, so you can't take him out there. Then he goes into a secondary room, but you can't get into there, so you have to disguise yourself as a waiter. But getting a waiter's disguise means also taking out a waiter because there are people looking at the waiter. That's hard, so you have to distract the waiter by turning on the sound system, which then causes him to go around the side. But then you have to very discreetly take him out and put him in a cooler so no one finds his body. Then go into the room, and even though you want to just take him out when he's leaning over the edge, you can't do that either because there's a guard in his peripheral vision, so you have to lure him over the side. I did it by flicking a few coins that he then picked up, and while he was just out of view, I managed to just about discreetly knock him out and take his clothes so that I could disguise myself as him. Unfortunately, someone did hear me, but because they only heard and didn't see, I managed to very quickly run out of there before anyone noticed what had happened. But even in that one aspect of the stealth, that becomes quite complicated, and the game doesn't necessarily tell you exactly what to do. It will give you a general directive, like disguise yourself as the drummer, but it won't tell you how to get him on his own so that you can rough him up and disguise yourself as him. It won't tell you any of that, it will just give you hints. You do have this focus mode, I think it's like an instinct mode, where you can see certain things in the environment that can help you out, which is how I saw the sound system that I could turn off, which then lured a waiter behind to turn it back on again, and then I was able to disguise myself as him. But even then there are added complications, because if you disguise yourself as a waiter and then you encounter, say, the manager of the waiters, which is indicated by a little white dot above their head, they will recognise you if you stay in their line of sight for too long. So you also have to avoid being in their sight. So it becomes super complicated, but it makes the whole thing very satisfying, because it's not just a case of sticking to the shadows like something in Splinter Cell, it's about hiding in plain sight. This is something that Assassin's Creed, well really more the original Assassin's Creed games were trying to do, and they succeeded to some degree, but I think here the idea of hiding in plain sight is realised extremely well. The game also has this dark sense of humour to it, where although it's never been goofy, you can occasionally see yourself and think, that looks a bit weird. Like, I mean, when I disguise myself as the drummer and start playing the drums in the middle of an assassination contract, it looks a bit strange, but the reason it works, I think, is because it is entirely justified by the situation. You are trying to impress him so that he'll then take you out onto the roof so you can kill him. So although something odd is happening, it is in service of the overall objective. It's not just goofiness for the sake of goofiness. There's another contract where you're doing yoga with someone, and she asks all her guards yet again to leave you alone so that you can do the yoga session in private. But as you're doing the yoga session, she moves closer and closer to the edge of a platform, and when she's right at the very edge, you push her over and you just walk off after she's died, which again is a dark humour way of killing her, but again, well, it's perfectly viable, and it wasn't like there was a more practical way of doing it, so it works, you know, it's a good way of doing it. Some of the ways you can kill people are actually very dark, not just in terms of the violent aspect, but in terms of the psychological aspect of it. There's one particular target whose greatest vulnerability is his recently deceased mother, and he's constantly having flashbacks to her, and he had a mental breakdown, and the ways you can take him out are to exploit that weakness. So there's one where you find this videotape of his old childhood memories, and you play it in his projector room, and you wait for him to come out, and then he gets so upset that again he sends his bodyguards away, and then you jump out from the shadows and take him out. But that's quite dark. I mean, that really is a very tormented way of destroying a target by first of all psychologically breaking them and then killing them physically. But it adds to the overall character and I think boldness of the game. It's not afraid to go in a few areas that you might not expect it to. I mean, I don't know of a game that allows you to wait for a grieving son to take his flowers to his mother's grave and then throw him in a wood chipper. I'm not saying that you'll want to do that, and there certainly are other ways of dispatching him, but it is an option. So this is a game that's tone is all over the place, but not in a distracting way. It's just in a way that you choose it to be there. You know, if you want to be the epic sniper who goes up to a tower and fires down from above like a traditional assassin look, you can absolutely do that. But if you want to disguise yourself and infiltrate, then that's great as well. Choice is a really strong factor in this game, and that's something I really appreciate. And it's not choice in too much the traditional sense where it's just do I go to path A or path B. These are entirely different approaches you can take to destroying a target. Sometimes the game can feel a bit slow, and I realised that as I was capturing some footage when I was tailing a detective. So one of the ways you can take out a target is to disguise yourself as a detective, and then you meet her under a bridge, and when she's under a bridge, again her bodyguards go away and you can take her out unseen. But it was really difficult waiting for an opportunity for the detective to be on his own. The first time I played a game it was quite easy because he goes into an underpass and there was no one in the underpass, so it was a perfect opportunity to knock him out and chuck him in a bin, take his disguise. But the second time I played it for this footage, I noticed there was a civilian in the underpass, which means that if I was to knock him out I would have been immediately compromised, which made the game a bit harder, which adds to the replay value in that just random elements like that, like the NPC placement, can change how difficult the game becomes, because something that before I was able to do in a matter of moments, in this playthrough I had to follow him all over the map, and then eventually he noticed me anyway because I walked in front of him, and then as he was wondering who I was because he was suspicious, I went towards the toilets and knocked him out in there, but someone saw me anyway and I only got away with it because I came out in a different disguise. So things can get very complicated very quickly. Even if you're not being shot at, you can be compromised by NPCs who know who you are, which kind of compels you to switch disguises if you can. You've also got a fair number of tools at your disposal, just different armaments, like you've got the silence pistol, you've got the fiber wire for very quickly taking out enemies from behind. You can pick up stuff around the environment, like there's something like rat poison, for example. If you pour rat poison into someone's drink, it won't necessarily kill them outright, but it will cause them to be very sick. And typically someone wants to be sick in private, so you can follow them into the private, and as they're being sick, you can then knock them out and disguise yourself as them. Again, it's something that, as I describe it, seems really messed up, but it's quite creative in practice. Sometimes it's a case of just making a noise and they'll go to investigate the noise and you can use that time to knock them out. And that's a distinction that I should make here as well. You're not necessarily killing everyone that you can in the level. In fact, the game outright discourages you killing anyone that's not a main target. So if I go up behind someone and I need to take their disguise, the easy thing to do might be to shoot them in the back of the head with my silence pistol, but that's discouraged. So what you actually want to do is knock them out, just getting them in a chokehold till they're going unconscious, and then drag them away and probably chuck them in a bin or a closet so that no one finds them. If someone manages to find a person who's left unconscious, they can wake them up, which means that you are therefore compromised if they noticed who did it. But you can go through this game only ever actually killing the main targets, and only ever making other people go unconscious to take their disguises, which is a really fantastic feeling where you go through an entire level and you take out both targets and no one ever finds the people you've killed because you put them in a bin or something, or you left them in a discreet location, and no one ever dies other than the main targets because you only chokeholded them out, and then you leave the level and you were basically a ghost. No one ever knew you were there until maybe a day later when people are wondering where these people are. It's super satisfying that you can do that. Just go in, do it, no one notices, and get out. In terms of difficulty, this can be a challenging game, so I'd recommend saving whenever you can if you're about to do something experimental. This game has a very aggressive line of sight for various characters, so an NPC can typically see about 180 degrees in front of them, I've realised. In a lot of games it's a bit tighter than that, like a 90-degree angle in front of them, so if you're in their peripheral vision you can sort of get away with it. In this game you absolutely cannot. A bit of advice if you're a new player to this: make sure that if you're going to do anything to anyone that's a bit suspicious, make sure that someone is totally facing away from you. And make sure that you are keeping an eye out for anyone who might walk past, because I've been caught out a lot of times where no one's looking and then I get them into a chokehold, but because I failed to recognise someone coming around the corner, I'm caught in the middle of the act and it's rather embarrassing. So something I sometimes do is, if I want to do something suspicious, so there's one bit where I was printing a 3D mask to then get into a biometric lock. I knew that there were 3 people on the top floor, and I didn't have to take any of them out, but I knew that if I started doing the 3D print, it would call attention to me. So I then had to take out all the people on the floor so that no one would come across me as I was doing it. Unfortunately, I decided to actually shoot one of them in the head, because I knew that if I got anywhere near him, he'd immediately become suspicious of me. So it's just things like this where there are so many factors in your approach. Someone else might just wait for the moment where no one's in the room, but I decided to play it safe by taking them all out on the same level. Outside of the gameplay, you have the story, which is interesting but not massively in depth. This, above all else, is a sandbox game, so the story elements that are here are usually just there for context. There are some cutscenes which develop intrigue, but this isn't a game for the story. But I don't really mind that, because I think if the story was too integral to the overall experience, it might hurt the replay value, and the replay value here is a strength of the game without a doubt. It certainly makes me interested to see what happens in Season 2, but, you know, when I look forward to Season 2, it won't be for the story, it will be for the new levels we see. So when we come to the recommendation, I'm not going to compare it to any other stealth game, because I don't think it fits alongside any other stealth game that well, because it's just so different. It's not really like Assassin's Creed, because Assassin's Creed has become more action stealth than it used to be. It's not like Far Cry, because that, again, is more about sticking to the shadows. This is about hiding in plain sight. And maybe it won't be for everyone, but what I will say is this: I think it is 100% worth buying Episode 1 at least to get an idea of what the game's about, because those first levels will give you a great idea about, you know, how the game works. And if you like that, if you enjoy that first level, there's a good chance you'll enjoy the rest of the game. In fact, I'd say that the first level isn't even really the best level, it just gets better from there. So that's what I recommend doing. Hitman is a fantastic game. I really enjoy it, and this isn't someone who is a long-term series fan. I am really a newcomer, at least to the old school way of the series. As always, people, thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.